Welcome. Today we're going to look at how we graph lines using a table. As you can see, here's our final project. We have our rule, we have our table, and we have our graph. So let's get started. So let's say we have the rule y equals 2x minus 3. This means we're multiplying our input by 2 and then subtracting 3. So let's make a table to get started. Just our typical input-output table. And now we're going to pick our own x values. And we're going to pick the x values from -4 all the way to +4. Okay? Now, to find our y value, again, this rule means we're multiplying by 2 and then subtracting 3. So we're going to do 2 times -4, which is -8, minus 3 is -11. Again, we did 2 times -4 minus 3. And that's how we got our -11, or -11. And we're going to do the same for the rest of these. So if you want to, you could press pause, try and fill in the rest of the table, then press play, and you could check your work with what I did. So same thing, 2 times -3 is -6, minus 3 is -9. 2 times -2 is -4, minus 3 is -7. 2 times -1 is -2, minus 3 is -5, and so on throughout the table. Now that we have our table, we want to make a graph. So we're going to make a 4-quadrant graph because we see we have positive and negative numbers. And we're going to take our time to be nice and neat. And we're going to make sure we label our axes. This is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. We're going to include our scales. In this case, we're just going to count by ones. Okay, now that we have our graph set up, we're just going to start plotting our points. Now, if they don't fit, it's no big deal. It's why we make a table so big with so many numbers. Okay, -4, -11 doesn't really fit, but that's not a problem. Neither does -3, -9. So we're going to start with -2, -7. We're just going to plot that point. -1, -5. 0, -3. 1, -1. 2, 1. 3, 3. And we start to see all these points are following the same pattern. All these points are lying on the same line, which is good news. It means we're doing the right work. Okay, so we got to the end point on our table. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw our line, nice and neat, through these points. We're not connecting the dots. We're drawing lines through the points and putting arrows on each end. And we're going to write the rule right next to this line. So y equals 2x minus 3. That's what we just graphed. Great. So we're going to try one more, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to try it on your own. So we have y equals -3x plus 1. So why don't you press pause, try and do this one on your own, then press play when you're ready to check your work. Okay, so again, we want to make a table. Just our input-output table. And we're choosing our own input values. So we're going to go from -4 to +4. And we look and we want to understand what this rule is saying. Y equals -3x plus 1 means we're multiplying our input by -3 and then adding 1. So for all of our x values, we're going to multiply it by -3 and then add 1. -3 times -4 is +12, plus 1 is 13. -3 times -3 is +9, plus 1 is 10. Okay, and just so on throughout this table. Great. So now let's set up our graph again. Again, we're doing our best to be neat. That's why we use graph paper, so we want to stay right on the grid lines. Label our axes, y and x, Include our scales. Again, we're going to count by ones. That's a good habit to get into. Unless we have really large numbers, we just want to count by ones. Alright, so now we're ready to plot our points. So negative 4, 13, that doesn't fit, but again, that's not a big deal. It's why we choose a lot of values for x. So we're going to start at the one we can plot, negative 2, 7. Now negative 1, 4, and right now we're just plotting points, which we know how to do. As we can see, they all follow the same pattern. They all on the same line, so that's good news. It means we probably did it right. So now we're going to draw our line nice and neat through these points and include arrows on each end and write the rule right next to our line, y equals negative 3x plus 1. Great. So if you need more practice still, go back to the textbook or go to some of the online resources and you're good to go. Great.